Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Yes and Brand Show. It's our 18th episode. And as many of you know, you were watching before I named the baby. It was sort of a John Doe live stream baby. And then it was like, when I decided on Yes and Brand, it matched the new book that I'm writing. So it had to be that. So welcome, everybody. And don't forget, you can actually, during this broadcast at any time, you can go into your settings on Facebook and you can sign up to be notified anytime I go live. So you actually will get bugged by me, but it will be fully with your permission. That's how we will notify you. It won't just be some random interruption. It'll be because you wanted to. So welcome, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am Kathy Klotz-Guest. I'm the founder of Keeping It Human, and I'm the author of, got to get this plug in, Stop Boring Me, Stop Boring Me. And Stop Boring Me is really what I call the little handbook for big idea innovation. It's how do we come up with new ideas for marketing, storytelling, products, whatever. And the lens to which I do it is really applied improvisation. How do we take all those great things that happen on the stage and how do we use them to come up with new ideas? And that's really what it is. And stick around. At the end of the show, I'm going to give you a discount code. I'm speaking at Funny Business in San Francisco in June. We're going to bring the funny, because funny makes money, but funny gets people's attention. So we're going to do that at Funny Business June 8th. And I've got a discount code if you would like to go and get a discount, because who doesn't like discounts, right? So we'll provide that at the end of the show, so stick around. All right. With me today, I'm very excited, is Carla Johnson. And Carla is the founder of Type A Communications. She is a speaker, an author, a storyteller. She's a creative explorer, and I love that. And we're going to talk about that term in a minute. And her latest book is Experiences. And I'm so excited to have her. Carla Johnson, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Kathy. It's so great to be here this morning.
It's great to have you.
Great Friday.
Well, it's great to have you. And everybody, as you come on in, just give us a little hey, so we know you're here. And people kind of float in and out of the show. You can always type your question and I'll put it up and we'll answer it as we go through. So, all right, let's talk about this big, bold, audacious topic, creativity in business, because it's just expansive and huge. And one of the ways that we talked about yesterday to frame it, and I love this, is, what's holding people back? Why aren't we doing it? And, as we're both creative people, and I know we have our own sort of lenses to which we look at this, we know it's a differentiator, but maybe let's talk about why it's so important. Let's start with why it's so important today. Why do companies maybe not embrace it like they should?
Well, I think the biggest reason that companies don't embrace creativity like they should is because they think of creativity as kind of an arts and craft kind of topic. And when you look at marketing, especially, the creative people have their own little group of pods over here that you let them kind of do their thing and they come out and they show us, web frames and we see brochures and things like that. And it's something that if you don't readily identify yourself as a creative, it scares the crap out of people. Because they're like, I'm not creative. I'm in finance, or I'm a project manager, or I'm all these other things, but I'm not creative, right? They don't see it as a general part of our natural DNA as humans.
Yeah. Hey, Lynn, welcome. Lynn Abate Johnson says hello from NorCal. So happy to have you. Well, so true. As you were talking, I'm laughing because if you tell people you come from marketing or you come from branding, it's like telling people that you're the theater kids of the business world. Hello, jazz hands. Exactly. That's what people think. They think theatricality, and it's such a little bit of a misnomer, because you're right. I mean, it's not artistry we're talking about. It's not about painting per se. It's about everybody's creative. And creativity has a place in business, or what are we doing here, right?
I mean, absolutely. When you look at innovation and ideas, it all has to start somewhere. Executives will say, go innovate, go forth and innovate. But what happens? Saying it and doing it are two really different things.
They're really different. It's so funny. I think we bandy about this word creativity and innovation. It just makes me giggle a little bit, because the comedian me, without framing, people always ask, well, okay, that's great. I'll go innovate. I'll get right on that. What do you mean by innovation? Because it can mean so many different things in so many different contexts. And I think sometimes businesses forget to talk about a lot about innovation in the funnel and commercialization of products, but we need to back that up a little bit, I think, and talk about creativity as a discipline and part of our culture and part of the way that I think companies think about new experiences and designing products in the very fabric of how they work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of that is just awareness of creativity, and it's all around us every day in everybody we talk to and the experiences that we have and the things that we read and see and do, and being able to tap that for inspiration and give context to it. So it does have legs and doesn't feel risky and freaky in the business environment. You know, especially like you and I were talking before we started, you come from the tech world and I work with heavy engineering driven B2B companies that are always looking for justification and rationale and data and everything. And creativity really has a big role in that kind of world. People just don't see the context for it. They
don't. It always cracks me up because I think people, you know, it's funny. I think we're all kind of amalgamations of different worlds. We all are. I mean, I am. And people forget that, you know, I have an MBA and I ran marketing in high-tech companies for many years. I just also happen to have, you know, 20 years of stage work. And so, you know, there is a place for creativity in business and a really solid anchored down context, not a woo-woo, you know, oh my God, Glee, the theater kids showed up, you know, oh my God, how's everybody today? We're going to practice being a tree and we're going to embrace our inner trees. No, but it's really anchored in how do we even come up with ideas for products and services, and how do we, you know, anchor some of this in design thinking and in practical application from the stage, and yes and, which the Yes and brand show is all about. How do we say yes to customer ideas? And how do we say yes to our employees and our own internal advocates? So there's sort of I always feel like there's a demystification. When I say creativity, I always feel like I have to caveat it. And I shouldn't have to. It's like, okay, everybody, I'm going to disabuse you of the notion. I'm not going to teach you improv. I'm not going to teach you how to be funny, but I am going to teach you some practical applications of how we can use some of these things that I've done for 20 years and bring them into this other thing that I did for 15 years in business. And there's a place for it. It's just not what you think. You know, so I feel like maybe this is the maturation process of creativity itself in business.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, when you look at creativity, we know it's about connecting the dots, right?
Yeah.
But where the skill and the critical thinking come in is that it takes that constant practice of creativity, so you're able to understand and identify what dots should even be in that bigger pool, and what's that path and process to connect them. So even like in design thinking, I love design thinking, and it looks at what is it that the customer needs and does and uses, and how do we back that into our process? But even that requires a great deal of creativity, because you need to be aware, you know, take off your blinders as a company and truly see things through your customer's eyes. And I think that's a foundational part of creativity, is just is situational awareness and coming in and looking at all the little things and not discounting them because you don't think they matter, but being open and take those blinders off and truly see what your customer sees and experiences and probably doesn't even realize. You know, what are the little shortcuts that they're taking that they don't think matter? And that's why it's so important with creativity that you actually go out and you watch people, because they make little shortcuts that they don't think that matters. But if we can look at it and understand reasons behind it, that's where it gives us amazing opportunities to be creative.
No question. No question. I love that. One of the things that I love from design thinking, and there's so many ways to be creative. There's, you know, and design thinking integrates a lot of empathy and improvisation. But one of the things I really love about design thinking is this concept of empathy. And so you are out there doing rapid prototyping with customers, and you're understanding the flow of their day so that when they get to your product and your experience, you understand the mindset that they're in. And, you know, I'll give you an example. I did a rapid prototyping session at Stanford's D School, at the design school. And one of the things that was really fascinating was like, how do you redo travel experiences? And there was a woman there, a customer that we were working with, and she and her husband had, and I didn't know this, they had purchased tickets to Buenos Aires. They were traveling to Argentina. Now, when she bought her tickets, nothing happened on that site. I forget what site she used. We wouldn't name it anyway, but nothing popped up that said, yes, I wouldn't call them out publicly, but nothing had surfaced in her experience, Carla, that said, you know what, you're going to Argentina. Did you know that when you land in Argentina, there is a disembarkation fee that you have to pay before you can get off the plane? Her travel experience, nothing popped up in that travel website that said, hold on, you know what? You need to know these things before you travel to Argentina. So they got there cold and they were held up on the plane. And I thought, that is such a brilliant it makes me seem like a small thing to a company, but that's a huge thing to a customer that they'll never use that site again. But what if we understood the mindset of everything that would happen from the moment they get on the plane to the minute they disembark, all those things that they're going to need. And we just made sure we held their hand and walked them through. Have you ever been to Argentina before? Would you like some travel companions? Would you like to meet up for some local dinner and have home cooked meal? Did you know you have to pay a disembarkation fee? And I think the beauty about that kind of creativity approach with empathy is now all of a sudden we're putting ourselves in their shoes and thinking, wow, somebody who's never been there wouldn't even know that. And if we don't tell them that, how would they even know to ask? Now you can best believe that that's going to ruin an experience for somebody who's going to go, you know what, that travel website never popped up an alert or some kind of advisory that told me that.
Yeah, it's like Maya Angelou says, people will forget what you said or you did, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. So as a brand, how is it that we're making people feel? And marketers may say, that's not what I sell. Like, it's not my job. My job is to book the ticket, So marketers look at their work a lot of times, even in a services situation, as transactional, not as value driven or experience driven. And I started my career in architecture, doing marketing for architects.
Oh my gosh.
And I loved it because when I worked with the design architects, and we worked a lot with children's hospitals and children's facilities, we would actually start out to say, okay, here's this child who's playing on the playground, falls, hurts her arm, goes home crying. They have to go to the hospital. And then, so what is it like from the time that child leaves the house to go to play at the park, hurts themselves, has to go to the hospital, and all of these sudden, scary, different things. What does this journey look like? And what is it like from the eyes of a child? And it was great because I worked with these amazing architects who actually went to the children's hospitals and they stayed overnight and they would navigate by walking on their knees so they could see everything from the angle and scale and scope of a child. So even things that we take for granted as an adult, like walking along the hallway, for them, they only see the bottom 3 or 4 feet. So, and it's just that, boring, monotonous, long hallway of wallpaper. How is it that you make it fun and less intimidating and more inviting and welcoming as a child? So what are those little things that we can do once we understand the entire experience around anybody that we want to bring in as a customer?
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing, and it seems so simple in hindsight. We're talking about it now, and it's like, well, of course we would walk around our knees because that's the eye level of a child, and it sounds so. And yet, time and again, businesses don't think about that. I posted very publicly about a horrendous experience that I had recently.
Oh no!
But and when I first posted, I used a fake name for the hosting company, and it really stunned me that they did not walk through calling their own numbers and understanding what the hold and the leveling process was within their own kind of customer escalation kind of thing. And I thought, so I said to one of the customer service people when I finally got rerouted, like by the 4th time, I said, have you ever gone through this path as a end customer or just randomly called to see what that customer experience was like? And I was met with like a minute of, it felt like a minute of silence. I'm sure it was only like 20 seconds, but it was this, awkward. And they said no. And I thought, there it is, because it's such a thing that we just take for granted, but it's so important to do. I mean, that's really what empathy is.
That is so true. And I've been thinking about within businesses, what's their hiring and recruiting process, their experience like for people. I've been thinking about this week because I heard a statistic that said for an Uber or Lyft driver, you can be a complete unknown as an employee, and 6 hours later be behind the wheel, and you are now driving, and you're an employee.
Yeah.
So when we look at creativity and we look at brands, I mean, we know what that recruitment and that sign up process is like when you go through the web form and you get, you're 30 minutes into it and something crashes and you have to start all over, or you go back a page and none of the fields are saved. It's horrible, and people are so frustrated before they ever actually click submit and can apply to a brand. So what if we use things like the inspiration of that Uber experience? What if we could get somebody who we don't even know, and 6 hours later, they're an employee? Maybe it doesn't work for every company, but what is it that we can take as an inspiration by looking at that situation and back it into our brand? Because I think there are so many amazing things that go on in our everyday life that we're completely oblivious to, and we don't look at them and say, that's amazing, that's brilliant. Now, how could I take the essence of that and back it into my brand and truly deliver an experience that's amazingly creative?
Yeah, so well said. I think we often get these blinders on, and I know, and sometimes working with tech companies, they will always look at same ilk, so their own industry for inspiration. And it's like, well, what if you got out of that and looked at, the consumer space, or you looked at ride sharing, or you looked at something outside your industry for inspiration? And I'll give you a really good example, and I've used this before in my workshops. There's a really brilliant case study of a restaurant in Chicago that, again, challenging assumptions. This idea that, every restaurant has to have a menu. Like, what if you actually just flip that on its head? And they decided, you know what? We don't need a menu. There's no rule book that says, on page 2 of the restaurateur.
And it's like the world's biggest book that you open.
Yes. The 10 Commandments of being a restaurateur. Thou shalt have a menu. There's nothing that says it. We have these like de facto sort of prescriptions, and we double down on them and we never question. So they actually said, you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do an experiment for a week. And they got rid of their menu. And what they would do is they would go down to the local farmer's market and get fresh ingredients. And then the service folks would walk around the tables and say, here's our fresh ingredients for the day. This is what we procured locally. What would you like us to make you?
Oh, I love that.
And it was such a runaway success. And it was just this example of, and I love that example because it fits with my improv and design thinking background, which is just challenging every assumption. Like every assumption about your business, I tell people, just write it down. What are you assuming is true? Are you willing to flip that? Are you willing to challenge that basic assumption? Because I think that's where we get stuck. And the basic assumption is if I'm, a big giant B2B marketing company, I have to follow suit with what my competitors are doing. No, if you like something that's happening in the ride sharing business, take that as inspiration. If you like something that's happening in the food industry, take that as inspiration. Inspiration can often come in these completely crazy collision ideas, and that's what I want people to take away is stop with the same old frame of comparison. Shake up the frame of comparison, because that's when these idea collisions, I think, are really going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that example about the restaurant in Chicago, because I actually have a label for this syndrome when companies look at something like that and say, it's crazy, it's ridiculous, that would never work in our world. And I call it brand detachment disorder. Because what they do is they look at that brand, and we're in B2B tech engineers. They are like straight and narrow. And they'll look at somebody, like the world's most interesting man with Dos Equis. They're like, no, that is just too weird. Put an engineer. What if it was the world's most interesting engineer and you did, a story on that? But they look at these things and they say, that is too weird, unusual, different. It would cost too much. My boss would never go for it. We sell boring stuff. And so they start to detach, and they don't take away the essence behind those really great ideas. They don't see how relevant it is. So they detach and they dismiss, and then they go back to the same boring status quo stuff that they've always done.
God, you just described my first 15 years in high tech and marketing.
I think a lot of people's first 15 years in marketing,
Yeah, no, it's so funny because, I always tell people I got my 10,000 hours of comedy in the slow lane. I worked and it was like I wasn't going to get a speeding ticket. It was like, beep, beep, would you get out of the way? Would you turn? But it's comical because my last job in high tech was I was a senior director of marketing at a high tech company, and I ran a team. But 5 nights a week and on weekends, I was doing improv shows and stand-up comedy, which I still do. And, fast forward 20 years, there's my 10,000 plus hours. But it's funny because I was always trying to bring in these learnings, and I kept getting told, we don't do that here.
Yeah.
So when my son was born, after my son was born, I went, you know what? That's it. This is crazy. I've got all these years of comedy experience and this experience, and if I can't do it here, I'm going to go do it somewhere. And hence that was the springboard for my kind of coming out party. but I think it's right. I think what happens is you just described that whole "we don't do that here" phenomenon. And I mean, I remember. It's funny. I remember saying, "I think this could work. I think this could work." And sure enough, ideas that were rejected, somebody else did. And they worked, and I went, yeah, see. But there is that kind of fear, and let's talk about that because I think you and I are both we've got the religion, we've got the creativity religion. We are evangelized.
That's right.
And so the question that becomes is, we know there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of we don't do that here. How do people navigate that? How can we help with that as creative people? And how do we, as business people, you and I both business people, how do we help people understand that there is a way to be smart about it, and you can reduce your risk, right? And
absolutely.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that's where people get hung up, and I think they don't have to. I think they spend a lot of time agonizing there, and I really don't think it's self-erected roadblocks.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I look at that fear, people aren't afraid of creativity; they're afraid of change. Yeah. Because with change comes that risk. And that's the biggest value. I think that's the biggest gift that we can bring to people, is to understand that creativity doesn't have to feel like a risk, that it actually is a strategic, thoughtful, structured process. And a ton of engineers use an amazingly creative process. They just aren't aware that that's what it is that they're doing. They may put different labels on it. Even like design thinking is very creative, but because they put together things that they understand as product designers or maybe engineers or other disciplines, UX, UI people, that seems more real to them. So it is a creative process, and it's giving them context for here's where you start with inspiration. Here's the essence of that. Here's what it means to our work and our brand. Now here's the ideas we have with that as inspiration. And now that we have this huge pool of ideas, now let's start to see, what constraints are we working within? What's our time constraint? What's our resource constraint? But when you start with what in the world is possible and bring that into the relevance and context of your own world, then put the constraints on, you have an amazingly more opportunity to think differently and to differentiate. But most companies start out with, here's all of my constraints. So they start out with a little tiny scope that they can work with. And of course, there are times when constraints make creativity a lot easier and better and faster. Yeah. But when you always start with, no, I can't, that kills creativity altogether. I understand. I'm from a family of engineers. I'm just a five of engineers. So I get that.
Well, and it is. And having done, been in high tech and also the stage, we call it yes and that's the essence of improv, which is that allows us to just move forward. And I think one of the things that I find when I work with engineers, and I having come from high tech, I work with a lot of engineers turned executives. And the issue for a lot of executives is they have a hard time getting over when they hear yes and, they think that is somehow a commitment to write a check. We're going to bankroll that. We're going to do that because they hear yes. And I always like to joke that, yes and doesn't mean you're going to do it. It just means you're going to take the idea out for a few drinks. Right. You're going to
date it a little bit.
You're going to date it a little bit. You may not propose to it.
That's right. See how you like each other.
All you're doing is saying, let's explore. That's all you're doing. And if they can kind of separate out the commitment level from just let's engage the idea. Let's engage the idea and see where it leads us. And in comedy, it's very important that we have this concept called hype me. So I liken it to idea hype me. Let's see where it can go. Let's see where the idea can go. how much comedy crazy and how much heightening, knowing full well that where we end up, if we started at A and we end up at B out here, we may not build B, but I'll tell you, we might get to somewhere in between that's better than A.
Absolutely.
So the point really with Yes and it's such a beautiful thing because it's really an outlook for life for me, is that it allows us to see what's possible rather than starting with, to your point, the no. Like if you're yes butting everybody, yes but is going to kill an idea like before it's even started. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we so go through life, most of us going yes but, we don't even realize that we're doing it. And I think technical people, I think, do it a lot because they're so used to engineering precision. You know, floating point, when you're building a bridge, floating points matter. It's not, you know what I mean? You got to have
life and death, right?
It's life and death. Structural integrity is not a squishy thing. So exactly. I get that. And I think it's just this idea of, to your point, we're saying it differently, but I think very much the same kind of kindred spirit idea, which is really being open to possibility. And again, don't worry about like maybe committing to the idea just yet, but just engaging on that possibility.
Yeah, and I think like you have so many wonderful techniques as a comedian, and especially in improv, of working in the moment. And I talk to people about, let's start conversations from the perspective of how might we, and then fill in the blank. And again, it doesn't mean you're committing to them. If, you know, let's pretend we were going to do this. Let's pretend Dos Equis was going to build or launch our next product. What would it look like? Let's pretend that Lego was coming in and they were going to run our marketing department for us. What would that look like? And for me, having people talk about let's pretend can take that pressure off because, you know, as kids you pretend and they explode with ideas. They don't worry about whether or not it works. They do it naturally. But for us as adults, if we start to say let's pretend, then sometimes it gives ourselves permission to let's actually pretend. And we know it's not real. We know we may not have to write a check, but then we start to start to explore things without realizing we're being creative explorers and can dig into them. And then we're down the road and we're like, oh, I was doing this and I didn't even realize I was doing it. And it's a great kind of release when people catch themselves doing something they thought was ridiculous or silly or, you know, arts and crafty and jazz handsy and they see it, it's like, oh, I did that and I didn't feel like a weirdo freak. Like it was fun and it was interesting and I like how it makes me feel.
Right. Absolutely. I don't know anybody who doesn't like unleashing their inner kid. I mean, I spoke at Funny Business 2 years ago. I'm speaking again this year. And the whole talk was really about sort of play like unleash your inner child, just play like a kid. And that's really what it is. And engineers want to play like kids too. They may not admit it, but they do. And
just keep their toys.
They've just got bigger, more expensive toys. That's all. But that's what AR and VR are. They're playing Pokemon. It's play. Lego. It's play. I mean, a whole bunch of engineers hacked the Lego site a number of years ago, and they made the Lego site better. Why? Because it was play for them. You know, it's like if somebody broke into my house and replaced my crappy furniture with better furniture, I wouldn't complain. I would be like, that's upside. That's upside. So it's really this idea of, you know, play. And I totally agree with you. I think one of the things that, and I love your comment here, Deborah, should you take them out for drinks? Well, it's funny. When I'm working with engineers, and I work with brand teams, and I've worked with engineers, when I'm working with engineers, one of the things, it's very different. Left brain people and right brain people are very different in the way they interpret it. With left brain people, and I know because I'm both, left brain people are very hung up on, you know, they have to be assured that this is just a process and we're just exploring. You're not committing to anything. So please, you know, it's okay to take that inner critic and table it. Give it a timeout. Say, all right, you know, you go sit in the corner and play for a little bit. This other playful side is going to come out. We're just going to, you know, see where it goes. We're not going to judge it yet. And as long as they know, they have permission, it's okay. There's no labels. There's no wrong. There's no fail. This is not engineering. There's no wrong. There's no fail. Then that becomes the the guidepost, and they're fine. Branding people are weirdos, and we're all weirdos. And we sort of, we'll embrace the play just because it's fun. But that's the difference in left brain, right brain, creative types, and nothing wrong with it. In fact, there's many times when I've worked with engineers that I never tell them they're doing improv till afterwards, because if I told them improv, they have all these preconceived notions of what improv is.
And then all of a sudden everything shrinks.
And everything, I can't do that because they think improv is synonymous with performing. It's not. It's just not. That's what the whole book is really about. It's not. And so when they play and they have fun and they have a great time afterwards, sometimes I'll surprise them and say, well, congratulations, you did improv. And then they're like, oh, I did? And it's you just get past the disbelief and the incredulousness and the sort of the devil's advocacy that comes out with a lot of left brain people. So, Deborah, whatever you got to do, if you want to take them out for drinks, just assure them that whatever you're doing, it's just there to have fun and to stretch and to grow, and there's no right or wrong, and that gets them a little bit out of their heads. So,
I think we as marketers sometimes we struggle with creativity, and we take it into the other worlds within our organizations. Yeah. We don't look at it as a structured process. Yeah. And it does feel weird because we don't know how to put it into the context.
Yes.
Whatever, the engineer's world or the sales world. So it does reflect back on us as being weird and flaky. So we as marketers have to look at, how is it that I can make this, how can I de-risk this process? How can I make creativity a mindset? How can I make it something that my colleagues are aware of all the time, every single day? And how is it that I get them to nurture it, to nurture this idea of tiny creativity in everything that you do? Yeah. And when we can put it into the context of a process, then I think it helps us understand it better as well.
I think that's really true. I think, creativity is not this, creativity can be messy, but there's a difference between creativity as sort of a exploratory exercise and creativity as a commercialization process to the beginning of what we call a commercialization funnel. And there's a discipline there. And I think we as marketers need to remember that there is a discipline, because part of the job of engineering and product people is to go, okay, but how is that going to be relevant? How do we anchor it into something real? So there's nothing wrong with sort of having the amorphous creative stuff, but then remembering to, I think, tether it down to something manageable. Then you start to winnow results. Now you're in a funnel, and I think you're right. I think we do need to hold ourselves to an accountability that says we understand the objectives that other parts of the organization are held to. So our job is to take this creativity and make it work for you. And that's what, as marketers, we can do. We can do. And we should be doing, because creativity is, to your point, creativity is both, a little messy sometimes, but creativity, when it's focused and it's brought into a process that's replicable, it actually can really, really help. And that's the beauty of something like rapid prototyping, design thinking. You can call it many names, but that's what rapid prototyping is. That agile process is nothing more than, the kindred cousin of design thinking in a more, I think, quantitative and focused way.
Right. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. And I think when there's a lot around agile marketing, and Jeff Julian talks about this a lot, if you can do these short sprints of turning out work, what it helps you do is get feedback and make those little shifts along the way, instead of waiting until it's all done and going, oh man, if we'd have known this back in stage 2 or 3 instead of stage 14 or 15, that would have made all the difference in the world, and we'd have been over here instead over there. And that makes a huge difference. So we have to, while we need to have empathy for our customers or our end audience, whatever that end audience is that we still have to understand that it's a process for them too, because just as we're trying to meet their needs also change, and it helps us be more fluid and responsive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, empathy starts internally, and that means understanding your internal customers. So marketing's got to work with sales, and it's got to work with the product people. It's got to be able to really understand that, the whole process is a story, and the user experience is a story, and everything about it is up for development. And everybody has a role to play in that creativity. And I think the other part that I think is really changing, at least this is my thing, and I hear everybody's got their different take on it. Everybody, Brian Solis says, experience is sort of the new marketing. And I really think that marketing itself has always been about that. I think marketers, I always joke that the best and worst thing to happen to marketing are marketers, because marketing has always been about these things. These are not new concepts. I think it's just marketing sometimes gets a little overzealous and forgets that its job is to empower everybody. And marketing is not supposed to be the bottleneck of the organization. Marketing is supposed to unlock value in all these different places. But I think too often marketing acts as gatekeepers. And honestly, I've never felt that was the role of marketing. Marketing's job is to take all the smart and collective intelligence and sales and product and all these other places and help figure out how to enable sales and take this creative intelligence and apply it to just a better experience, better products, wherever it lives. I don't care where it lives. It shouldn't be siloed. It's not marketing's job to be the definitive thing in all things of creating value. And I think that's changing. I think there are companies that are starting to feel more progressive about that, but there's still companies that, either marketing defines everything or sales defines everything. And that can be problematic too, because creativity is multidisciplinary, right?
Yeah, and to your point about marketing's role, I see it as being, people say marketing's role is to drive leads and to do this, to enable sales. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, it really diminishes the value that marketing can bring to a company. And at the end of the day, marketing's role is to create value. And it doesn't matter if that's value to sales, if it's value to a customer, but really value to an audience. And when we look at that and we look at how can we be more creative in how we look at marketing's ability to deliver value, that's where we're seeing a lot of creativity with companies. So you look at Johnson's Baby Center, it's not branded as Johnson & Johnson. It's a help site for young moms, to be parents. And that's their resource. And it's an incredible site that delivers value driven by marketing. And it's its own experience outside of what it is that the brand sells. But they're able to take the questions that they get from that site, all the data and analytics, and it informs a tremendous amount of thing for products for Johnson & Johnson. But if they had looked at how do we use the site to enable it and drive sales, it would have been a completely different situation, and I doubt it would have ever have been as successful. You see this with Schneider Electric and their university. We see this with Emerson and their I Love STEM program. You see it with Nike and their fitness apps. So it's much more than just, let me give you a qualified lead sales department. It's how do I deliver value that's outside of what it is that we sell as a product or service, because that's when marketing really can get creative about what it is that they deliver. And that's when those brands really stand out and differentiate themselves in a creative way. And companies talk about, well, we've got to disrupt the marketplace. We've got to do this and that. The last thing a C-suite person wants to hear is, I've got this wonderful disruptive idea, because all it does is it's going to throw a wrench into everything, and it's going to be miserable to try and manage. And so this is a way to bring creativity in a thoughtful, structured, less risky way that adds value, that isn't just about driving sales. It's about truly differentiating your brand.
Totally agreed. Mark Fidelman, thank you. That's a nice compliment. And he says you two are great representatives of the brand. Well, thank you. And as are you, Mark. We love you. Mark also had this other comment, and it gets to what we were just talking about a second ago with Carla. Marketing's job is to drive sales and leads. It's also to unlock value in other parts of the organization. And I'll give you a really good example. Last year, I was speaking at Content Marketing. I was speaking at a content marketing conference, and I had this really amazing conversation with a bunch of people from IBM. And, you look at IBM and, I would not have said this 5 years ago, but IBM has done so much in evolving its brand story and the way that it communicates. And 5 years ago, if you'd asked me, I'd been all, no. But I just give them I give them credit, actually, because here's the thing that they did. And I think it gets to your point and the point that we're both making and Mark's point. they started, gosh, like 10 years ago, recognizing that they had all these experts, subject matter experts throughout the organization, and they were not in marketing. Here's a hint. Your best storytellers, everybody, big shock, not in marketing. Big shock, everybody, they're not in the C-suite. Big shock, they're the closest to the customer. Those are your best storytellers.
Yep.
So what they did is their marketing recognized that, you know what, there is a roadblock. We are a bottleneck. Marketing is a bottleneck. And what we ultimately care about is matching customer needs with the internal subject matter experts. So they started to open up these blogging platforms, training, and marketing's sort of in charge of the meta story of IBM, right? But then they enabled these subject matter experts throughout the organization to really connect with the end customer. And what they found, now this was not an overnight thing, but what they found after about 7-8 years of this blogging program is that their subject matter experts increased the customer lifetime values. Increased customer lifetime values because if I'm renewing at a very, expensive, IBM
type product,
I don't want to deal with marketing. I want to talk to the internal subject matter expert on that platform who's going to help me understand what it means to implement. And I'm going to derive more value from my now subscription. Ultimately, the renewals go up, and what they found, which was brilliant by their own, and I don't know exactly how they calculated it. I was trying to get some answers. I didn't. But they found over 7-8 years' time, if you are patient and you do it right, you will unlock, and you could probably do it in shorter time horizons too, more immediate ROI. But the longer term ROI, the arc of that ROI was increased customer lifetime values by a factor of, get this, 7 times.
Holy smokes, that's amazing.
Because marketing recognized that, yes, our job is to get leads and qualified leads and all that stuff that marketing does. But the difference between marketing as a cost center and marketing as a profit center is helping to unlock expertise wherever it lives and get that expertise, get out of the way, and get that expertise like a marketplace to the end customer, wherever that expertise lives. And I think if you look at marketing that way, and that's why I'm a weirdo, because I've always looked at marketing that way, even when my CMO would say, that's not what we do. And I'm like, that's what you should be doing.
There you go.
Yeah, it's like bleeding edge marketing. Kathy Klotz-Guest, bleeding edge. But that's to me the thing that I think marketing needs to be doing now. And if it does think like that, and I love that example from IBM, I love your Johnson & Johnson example, Carla, because it's such a great example of marketing getting out of its way and recognizing that, hey man, we're traffic cops and we are going to add value. But the best that we can do is let this other value get unlocked here and get rid of the silos. Wherever that expertise lives, that expertise needs to get out to the outside world. And I'd like to see more marketing kind of do that,
Yeah, and I think when you look at what marketing's role is, people talk about what's the future of marketing? What is it that we need to know? And for me, we have conversations like this, you and I, and really the future of marketing isn't marketing. It's about collaborating and how can marketing serve as that facilitator to make other people within an organization hold hands and work together and play nice with the intention of putting that customer first and foremost. So a big role in what we have to do is that we have to be the collaborators. And the next role, and Kathy Button-Bell from Emerson talks about this so much, is that we have to be the chief inspiration officers. So we have to be the ones to inspire those engineers to talk to the customers and not just, sit in their R&D place or work on their computers, but want to engage and inspire them to want to share what it is that they know and inspire people to work together in different ways. And it's a different role. And when we look at marketers, I'm like, well, I didn't have that class in my MBA program. That's not on my job description. But these are the things that we really have to look at and understand as marketers that this is what the role is about so much.
It really is. And again, I have this theory and I did a talk. I've been talking about this for years, but I actually codified it into a talk. And I did a talk last month on why marketing should run like an improv group, because that's exactly what it is. This is exactly what we're talking about. And because I didn't learn in business school and I didn't learn in tech all these different things. What I learned was making your partner look good from improv. And it was really, how do we unlock the smarts of everybody on stage And I get really passionate about this because after 20 years of doing this, I know this stuff works and I believe it in my soul. That's why I do what I do. And I think it really is this new way to be in marketing. So whenever I hear marketing is the new this and marketing is the new that, I'm like, well, I think marketing's job has always been to uncover these things. It's just, I think we're now finally getting to it. So whenever I hear a new thought leadership, like marketing is this or marketing is that, I can't help it. My eyes roll back a little bit in my head and I go, if marketing could just simplify and just recognize that it doesn't really matter where it comes from. Marketing doesn't have to be the keeper of all great ideas, right? And I think we're getting there. But it's this creativity thing that we're talking about, And what are some tips to help people reduce risk, Carla? Because I know people get. I talk to people all day long. I know you do too, and they kind of get this glazed look in their face, and they're like, "But it's risky. It's risky." And yeah, guess what? No marketing is risk-free. So there you go. But let's talk about some things that people can do.
And I want to say hi from Kelly from Switzerland.
Hey, Kelly. Good. See?
The biggest thing that is so important for marketers to understand, or anybody to understand about creativity, is that we have to give it context. Yeah. Because when we give it context, that's what starts to make it feel familiar. And that's what takes the risk out of it. And that's, again, back to people. It's not that people don't want to be creative. It's that they don't want to change. Yeah. And if we can take the risk out of change, that's what matters. So with creativity, if we can show that process between what is it that inspires us. So for IBM, like what is it that inspired them to, what is it that they saw about blogging that they said, I bet we can bring this into our engineering world, and what is it that we saw outside? How did it work? What's the essence of that? Now, what does that mean to the IBM brand, or what does that mean to my brand? Now, because of that, what I learned, what are some opportunities and ideas that I see that we might start to try on a very, very small scale? And I think with creativity, it's what is so important to remember is that you don't go home on a Friday night from work and show up on Monday, and Friday you weren't creative, and now Monday you are.
Right.
It's all those little bitty decisions along the way.
Yeah.
Let me try something that makes it a little bit different. And sometimes for some people, their first step into creativity and taking a little bit of a risk is, how when you have team meetings and everybody comes into a conference room and everybody has that unspoken seating chart of where everybody says, Charlie sits here and Karen sits there. And whatever you do, do not sit in those seats because those are sacred. It's where they always sit. You know what? Sit in their seat one day and just watch how it upsets all the dynamics within the conversation and the energy in the room that day. That is a super small thing that you can start to take as a risk. What are things that you see, interactions that you see every single day that are just status quo, they're on autopilot, that if you just changed a little bit would change your whole perspective, and that's a ripple effect. Even what's the route you take to drive to work every day? If you ride your bike to work, or if you drive to the grocery store, maybe you walk instead. What are little bitty things that you can do on a really small scale to nurture creativity and to nurture a willingness to take little bitty risks? Because it's that culmination of those little risks, taking Larry's chair or Karen's chair and just watching what happens. That's what gives you little bits of confidence that makes you more willing to speak up and to suggest something bigger along the way. So it's those little tiny practices of creativity that mean so much.
Yeah, I agree. I think we talk a lot about creativity as this big thing, like this big giant revolutionary thing. And sometimes that's the disruptive stuff. But but it started little somewhere. Right, and there's this thing called, just incrementalism, right? Incremental creativity, which is the daily little tweaks. And that's kind of what you're talking about, which is what I agree completely. The way you reduce risk, at least in my mind, in my experience, what I have seen is it's these small little things, like exactly what you're suggesting. Start small, but get it out there. One of the things that I do all the time is I try little things on Twitter. I'm on Twitter and I'm constantly trying things. And if people laugh or they like something, I go, that's a blog post, that's a meme, that's whatever. Yeah. And I double down on that. And then people see, it is funny. And the things I post, I love that people laugh and think it's funny, but there's an idea behind it. I'm really testing material without you knowing that I'm testing material. That's what I'm doing. So now my secret's out. But the thing is too, is that you will actually, a lot of random experiments, a lot of these small little very low risk little things will start to tell you what's working and what's not. The other thing I think with IBM, when you start to look at bigger creative experiences, one of the things they told me is this was a pilot program that, took them a good year or two to figure out, but they doubled down because somewhere along the line, they recognized that there's the short-term payoff, there's the long game, and they were in it for the long game. So they decided that they would run a pilot. And I think this is important. If you're not sure about something, it doesn't hurt to have a small little beta, get your best customers, get your best employees, whatever it is, get your best sales folks, whatever. And get feedback. Just see how it does, and if it works, then double down on the investment. So that if you're gonna learn quickly, learn cheaply, and learn without sort of the big risk. But find a way to do that. Find a way to get past the no and get buy-in and do something really limited so that it has a very small sort of, backsplash, if you will. And then see if you can roll that out on a longer term kind of thing. And that's one of the things that I see work in companies. But find a place to start. Start somewhere. It helps having an internal champion. But I've done this. If you can't get an internal champion easily, and you're in marketing, maybe go to your best customers and ask for their feedback, because I've been in situations where when I was in high tech and I was running marketing, they may not listen to me, but I'll tell you, if 3 of our best customers said, we like that idea, let's do that idea, then it's not my idea. It's, the customer said. and then all of a sudden there's and for lack of, because we know how this works sometimes when you work for somebody else. But when it's hard to contradict really solid customer feedback. And when you have that from your best customers, that becomes a green light to a lot of things. So there's a lot of ways to do this.
Yeah, and I think Kathy Button-Bell from Emerson also talks about this, about how you move big ideas forward. And a lot of times once you have that idea, it's the data behind it, because you can't argue with the data. Yeah. So if you can, maybe it's customer research, maybe it's market research, whatever it is, that's where it turns the arts and craft department into a value driving strategic advisor group within the organization. Because it is so important that's how you bring validity and de-risk that change, because people may love the idea, and that's the emotional side of them talking and saying, I really want to love this, I really want to do this. However, that lizard brain kicks in and they want something that feels safe and secure. And that's where the data and the research comes in and helps support to move that idea forward.
It does. The only caveat I give, and I know this from doing comedy, is that if we get too many people in a room, things flow to the most conservative point. So if you're trying to do creativity by committee and your committee is, 50 people, including the legal team at your company, no.
Whose job is to say no and whose job
get sued. Because you might as well, let's face it, legal team is risk mitigation. That's their job. And so just be aware that when you do get too many people involved, it can be really hard to get agreement and to move forward. So I think small teams, and then roll it out there. Start small. Think of it in concentric layers. Start with your immediate team and get buy-in, and then fix it. You get the feedback and roll it out larger, then roll it out even larger, and think in kind of concentric circles. And I think what you'll find is that you'll get buy-in, a rolling kind of buy-in. And that's how, back when I was in high tech, that's how I did it. And sometimes I got forgiveness and not permission.
Right. when we work with those legal teams and the CFOs and all the people who we traditionally know, they're going to say no, they're going to say no.
Right.
Instead of approaching these creative conversations with asking permission, can I do this? Can I have permission? Can I go back to that statement of how might we?
How might we? Yeah.
How might we? Because
What if?
that's yeah. What if that's not a yes or no? Because a cat eye is a yes or no. I grant you permission. The gladiator, thumbs up or thumbs down.
Mm-hmm.
What we want to do with creativity at every point along the way is to iterate. So iterate the idea, iterate it from that little wacky idea inspiration into something that looks like it may work, and then continue along the way. How might we take this great idea and have it fit within something that works from the legal perspective or from the finance perspective? But I think that how might we statement is so powerful, even though it is so simple. So simple.
It's really simple, but it's beautiful. You know, how might we is the kindred spirit of what if, which I use a lot, is it's possibility thinking.
Absolutely.
And yes, and which is how could we build this together and end up somewhere better than where we are? But I think you bring up a really good point. This is not about sort of trying to do end runs around the legal team. Trust me, nothing would make me happier. But but from a practical standpoint, learn as much as you can about your internal client, because to Kelly's point here, start with your loyalists. That's a great way to go. But I find that a lot of times, you know, when you're talking to your internal constituents or your external constituents, they might have a really valid point that you had not considered. So when you think about them, not as necessarily, you know, green light, red light, but you think about them in terms of, what do they know that if I knew might change the scope and how I sort of plan this? Because there may be a mitigating circumstance or factor you had not anticipated. So I find that if there's anything that I need to know and I let them in on it early enough, they will work with me. And then to your point, which I totally agree with, the language that I learned in design thinking and improv, how might we, what if, and yes and. How might we? What if, and yes, and, because that allows for expanding the possibility.
Yes.
And, you know,
and when you bring those people in and get their insights and their buy-in from the beginning, that's a fabulous way to work within the internal political environment, because when they're a part of building something, they care about it and they want to see it come to fruition. And that group turns into your internal champions as well.
No question. And they're not saying no necessarily because they want to. Some do. Some like it. Right. But I think a lot of them, you know, their task is with looking out for the bottom line and the liability of the company. So you always have to remember, as your internal customer, they just have a different framing. And, you know, if that doesn't work, you know, tell them jokes. I think I got away with a lot of stuff in corporate. Here's my secret. Because I use my comic ability, and there you go.
And it's an amazing skill, because just that ability that you have to make people laugh and laugh at themselves, it takes their walls down and it brings the humanness back together. You know, okay, you know, funny, I relax. Okay, now what is it that we're really trying? You know, you have such a gift of bringing people together like that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I certainly appreciate it. Well, and how can people find you on the Twitters, the internets?
On the interwebs. My Twitter handle is at Carla Johnson, Carla with a C, and my website is typeacommunications.com.
Fantastic, fantastic. Carla, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for showing up. You can find me at Kathy Klotz-Guest, no hyphen, and also at keepingithuman.com. Carla's book is Experiences.
The seventh era of marketing. Yes, experience. The seventh era of marketing.
Seventh era of marketing. Mine is Stop Boring Me, and it's a lot of the kind of creative stuff we're talking about, but it's really creative exercises through the lens of what I know for 20 years, which is improv and comedy. So with that, everybody, I'm going to post, those of you, I don't have it right now, but after I end the broadcast, I'm going to post the discount code for Funny Biz. So if you want to go to Funny Biz, where I'm speaking June 8th in San Francisco, I got the goods for you. I'm going to type it, I'm going to type it exactly like this. I'm just going to do exactly like this. I'm going to type in that discount code for you. So, Carla, thank you so much. I know you're traveling and you made time for us, and I'm so grateful that you did. So thank you.
It was absolutely a delight to meet you. Kathy, thank you for making my day.
Same here. You made my day. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. To Kelly, to Deborah, to Lynn, to Mark. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful Friday and happy weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.